Hey, welcome back to the TechArena podcast. My name is Kaluka Wanjala, and in this episode, we are going beyond the technology to explore something even deeper. We are going to look at what does it actually take to build blockchain solutions in Africa. So a few weeks back during the Cardano Africa Tech Summit, I spoke to several builders from across the continent. Each of them is working on different problems, some from lending, digital marketplaces, to education, to healthcare, to trust systems, and even environmental sustainability. But when listening back to this conversation, one thing became clear. Building in blockchain isn't just about the technology. It's about understanding real problems, navigating communities, finding practical ways to make new systems work in the real world. So in this episode, we are going to explore that journey through the voices of the builders themselves. So one of the first conversations I had was with Olivier from Goma. And one of the first patterns that emerged throughout the conversation from this conversation is that many builders don't start with a blockchain. They start with a problem they see around, and then they work the solution around that. Have a listen to Olivier.
The problem I saw is that always in the world, wherever the need of buy and sell, it's for everyone. So we realized that this should be something to be solved, especially in Goma town in DR Congo, where we live in the war situation, where youth people and almost men of people, they don't have jobs, but they go through commerce. They try to sell and buy, but we realize that for those who do that physically, they face some problems of rent, of taxes, and this push them to let this activity, while this activity is the main for them um, daily life. But also the commerce, for some others, they start to do that into social medias.
So as you listen to Olivier, it's very clear that in places like Goma, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, informal trade supports thousands of livelihoods. But these systems always operate without digital infrastructure, and this makes it harder for people to access broader market, and it limits their expansion and even their earnings. And even with that said, sometimes the problem isn't just access to market, it's access to knowledge. I had a conversation with Laurentine who can explain this a bit further. Have a listen to this.
What I'm trying to change is I will first start by stating the reason why we got to this. Like the representative of the team said earlier, we noticed that from 2029, 2020, there was when we introduced Cardano to Burkina Faso, we noticed that there was a lot of communities, crypto communities that were in Burkina Faso, and they were more interested into crypto trading. But as time went on, we noticed that those communities were no longer active. And when we inquired, we realized that these people did not understand what they were doing. And some of them got scammed because they invested into crypto, but they were not able to find their way around how to manage their assets, how to do a transaction and all those things. So we noted that there was a problem, and then we decided that, okay, we are going to bring this solution. That is to, first of all, teach them how to go about it, and also to create a platform where they can personally manage their assets, get to do transactions without much difficulties.
So Laurentine's perspective highlights something that many ecosystems face, especially during the early stages, and which is technology adoption often moves faster than education. So education really comes later after the technology has been adopted. But even as you talk about that, education isn't enough just alone by itself. Communities also need spaces where people can collaborate and build together.
If I could describe Cardano as a city, I think Cardano will look I don't know which city. Maybe Douala has a lot of potential, but it's kind of chaotic. So you have to find your way around. Kind of really interesting as well. Plenty of opportunities, but also you have to really ground it in a mathematical culture. So, that's Cardano. But I'm an artist, so last year we had a project called "If Cardano Was an African Mask." I think that to that question I've answered better.
So, so that metaphor where he's talking about a city full of potential is quite interesting. Cities thrive because they bring together builders, innovators, educators, and users. So you have to bring all these people together for the city to thrive. In many ways, blockchain ecosystems are trying to do the same thing, bringing people together so that they can build together. But even in a thriving ecosystem, building something meaningful is never easy.
When the business is not working out, which I later on came to realize that it's part of the process. Okay, so I could start a number of other ventures that never worked, right? So I almost started thinking like I'm failing. I'm a failure, you know? Yeah, but what I did was I started focusing on the positive side of things. What lessons can I pick from here, and how can I do better going forward? Yeah.
So that was Frederick, and his perspective reminds us that behind every new technology trend are entrepreneurs navigating uncertainty. So the uncertainty will always exist since you have this new technology that not many people know how to use it or how to take advantage of it. And some of these entrepreneurs are trying to solve very practical examples like opening access to finance.
So typically, when as a loan officer, you would normally be operating very manually, chasing paperwork, chasing your clients for printed bank statements, chasing your clients to come to the branch for you to advance the loan, for you to interview them. But when you adopt our platform, we do two things. First, we provide for you a loan management software that automates every aspect of lending. So no more branch visits for your customers unless you want them to come to the branch. So it's optional now. And then also reduction in paperwork. Yeah, so they can share all of that stuff digitally. And then the second thing, we provide credit profiling solutions. So typically, it would be a lot of guesstimation, trying to understand the cash flows of his client or doing it manually. Yeah. So what we do is that we transform, what small businesses have, which is mobile money statements and bank statements. That's the data points that they have. We transform that into a credit profile that then equips you with the data that you need to be able to estimate how much can this customer afford from real cash flows, not the stories that they tell you, from actual cash flows that they receive every week, every month, every day. We do an estimate of that, and then we also show you behavioral patterns about this client that will indicate to you whether or not they are credit worthy. So we remove a lot of guesstimation and have a lot of objective and verifiable decisions in credit.
This is quite interesting to hear because in many African markets, small businesses struggle to access credit because lenders lack reliable data. And if the lenders don't have the reliable data, they're not going to willingly lend to small businesses. Systems like CloudFi attempt to solve this gap by turning financial data into usable credit insights. But even as we talk about that, we can move to the next segment where finance isn't the only sector where builders see opportunities. There are so many others that we can talk about, but the next one is environmental innovation.
In the next 5 years, depending on how we can use blockchain, because to be honest, Reloop is solving really two problems. We're solving how we can incentivize e-waste, but also how we can build simpler blockchain solutions for people to use. One of the things we've done within our Reloop system, when a user logs in, they automatically get a wallet created. So they don't have to manually create a blockchain wallet on their own. And one of the ways that we're going to get the ordinary mwananchi to be able to use blockchain is by being able to use this kind of tools. And further, we're working with other Cardano startups such as Excapit that have developed USSD wallets. So that means now we can extend the usage from not just smartphones, to feature phones, but make it so that a 60-year-old does not have to create a wallet if they need to use it, but they'll still be able to interact with the tokens.
What's particularly interesting about this approach is that users don't even need to understand the blockchain. The technology operates quietly in the background while people interact with the system in familiar ways. So everything feels familiar to them, and the technology that's behind what they're using is not even that important to them at that particular point. And that right there leads us to another insight that came up during the conversation. Have a listen to this.
When we start reaching out to the one who have these problems, what we decided is like like when you sell mobile, like you don't tell them how the mobile works, how the operation works, so on. So we just tell them or pitch them about only the solutions. We more focus about the solutions. You have these problems and we're gonna solve you with on blockchain, but this is the solution. So we don't mostly focus on the blockchain parts because most of the people are not tech savvy, because most of the athletes are from rural areas and some of that. So we have some good ambassadors that can work with the athletes, so to explain them how the solution works. Also, if they are good, we give them the blockchain pass. So the good thing that helps us is not explaining about the technology, but explaining about the solutions.
And that idea might be one of the most important lessons from these conversations. For blockchain adoption to grow, the technology itself may need to become almost invisible. No one needs to know about the technology, or a few people may need to know, but it needs to operate in the background for adoption to actually grow. So when listening to these conversations, it becomes clear that blockchain systems don't grow because of technology alone. They grow because people identify real problems, experiment with new solutions, and build communities around those ideas. The builders that we've featured in this episode are working on very different problems, from informal marketplaces and education to lending systems and environmental sustainability. But their journeys share a common thread: a willingness to experiment and build beside uncertainties. Whether these projects ultimately succeed will depend on adoption, regulation, and continued ecosystem support. But one thing is certain with this: the experimentation is already happening. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. This episode was produced by TechArena in partnership with Beyond the Code, and you can check them out at beyondthecode.ai. My name is Kaluka Wanjala. Thanks for listening.